Hey everyone, I can't say for sure as I'm writing this script, but chances are this is a pretty long video, so thanks for clicking. I hope you stick around to watch the whole thing if I can hold your attention for that long, but even if you're just coming to check this out for a little to kill some time, or are curious to find out what I think about a specific weapon and its individual stats, I welcome you. Today I'm going to be breaking down each weapon for the soldier by their stats, and we're going to be taking a look at every weapon in the soldier's arsenal, explaining each stat and rating each stat on a scale of 5 stars. Positive stats will be rated from debatably negative to excellent, while negative stats will be rated from debatably positive to detrimental. This is hopefully going to be an educational experience for some people. I'm honestly hoping that a new player stumbles across this, as I'd love to teach people about this game if I can, and there's lots to learn. So this video will contain information, opinions, and no gameplay, so you might want to just throw this on in the background while you do something else. But yeah, I don't actually have a means to play TF2 right now, so I can't record game footage until about late July or August. However, while I'm waiting to get my PC transported from my old house to where I'm moving, I do want to continue making all kinds of videos and trying to get some viewers, hopefully. Anyways, I'll leave timestamps in the description if you want to skip ahead to a specific weapon. Now before starting, I just would like to point out that this video is inspired by someone who doesn't make TF2 content. Yeah, this video is inspired by otzdarva, a Dead by Daylight streamer. I don't really play Dead by Daylight because I'm not really good at it, but I think it's really fun to watch and learn about. It's an interesting game. Anyways, Otz did a video where he broke down, explained, and rated every perk from that game. So I just thought, you know, what if I blatantly copied it, but for an entirely different game? And here we are. First stat.
Rockets fly straight down the crosshair from the center of the screen.
By the way, stats that aren't explicitly made clear whether or not they're supposed to be positive or negative are assumed to be positive, because they usually are. So the original's one and only stat, the only reason people consider it more than just a reskin. You know, there was a time where no one really cared. People didn't even know that left-handed view models fire projectiles differently. But when a community is starved for content long enough, they eventually decide, you know what, this is probably different enough from this to be its own weapon. Yeah, I think so. This is its own weapon. So, in a way, we got a new weapon right here, guys, right? New weapon! Yay! New weapon, content! And fine, I agree, this stat has a significant impact on minor things. It supposedly makes pogoing easier, which I can't say for myself, as I learned how to pogo with stock, and I'm pretty sure once you've gotten good at it, it's unnoticeable. You just tilt your aim a bit with stock, but don't with the original, which I guess makes sense and would make it easier for a beginner, but I can't really say, you know? I've sunk countless hours into Soldier, but have not even come close to mastering rocket jumping. I'd like to think I'm an expert on all things practical in gameplay, at least casually. The other thing with this stat, you can't fire around corners like you can with stock. Significant difference, but minor thing. It's not the end of the world that you can't fire around corners as easily, but it would be enough to dip this down into the debatably negative category if it weren't for the pogo thing, as well as the fact that it might make air shots easier. Again, I don't fucking know, but I've heard this is true. Regardless, at the end of the day, this weapon is the definition of preference. The difference in-game is noticeable, but not significant enough to be considered serious. It's just whichever one feels better in your hands, better to shoot, better sounding, better to rocket jump with.
Has 80% faster rocket speed.
So the direct hits rockets fire nearly twice as fast as stock, which at first glance is perhaps the most noticeable thing about the weapon. Now the thing with weapons that have faster projectile speeds is that they're sometimes known to fuck with your aim and muscle memory. For example, many people don't use the lock and load because they're so used to stock or the Iron Bomber, and the increase in projectile speed is something they kinda have to temporarily rewire their brain to adjust to. The same goes for the Man Melter, but that weapon kinda sucks to begin with, so it doesn't really matter. But in the context of a rocket launcher, that doesn't apply as much, since you don't have to worry about a change in arc or trajectory because it's a rocket. All rockets move in straight lines. Some just move at different speeds. And in the context of the direct hit, this stat is kind of necessary to the weapon. The whole point of the weapon is to go for direct hits, as the explosion radius is tiny. This is made easier by a faster projectile that's harder for enemies to dodge since they have less time to react to it. This is also great for dealing with pyros. Since the rockets travel so fast, many pyros have a hard time reacting in time to reflect it, let alone reflect it back at you. I think that without this very good stat, the direct hit would suffer greatly and require a lot more work for a reward that isn't worth it.
Deals 25% more damage.
I'm fairly certain that the intent of this stat is to somewhat make up for the consistent damage you lose by being forced to go for direct hits rather than being able to rely on splash damage, which is nice. You know, this weapon certainly wouldn't be very good without this stat. You need something to compensate for the fact that you're probably going to be missing more often. But that's not what makes this stat very good. It's the side effects. This allows you to one-shot light classes and Vitasaur medics if you're close enough, so that's super useful, but what's even better is how good this is for taking out sentry nests. Since buildings don't move, the chances of you missing go down quite a bit, and since you deal way more damage, you can take out a sentry before the engineer even has time to react. This stat, paired with the rocket speed, just makes things blow up in the blink of an eye.
Guarantees many crit damage on opponents sent airborne by an explosion, grapple hook, or enemy attack.
Okay, this stat's weird. Like, it's not really necessary, considering if you pop someone up into the air, then shoot them again while they're still airborne, chances are they're gonna be pretty fucking dead. If not, they'll crater. So I guess this is just there to make sure of it, like maybe they're overhealed or something. But on the flip side, let's say it's a rocket jumping soldier you airshot that would have otherwise survived. Why are you being rewarded for doing something that is made easier by the projectile speed? Stock doesn't get many crits on airshot. That's like putting a kid on a bike with training wheels, then giving him a candy bar for not crashing, while also putting another kid the same age on a bike without training wheels, then ignoring him as he does a wheelie or something. It's just weird and not necessary. Mediocre stat in my opinion. Strange choice of weapon design.
Has 70% smaller splash damage radius.
This is the direct hit's one downside and the most influential stat of the weapon. The tiny explosion radius defines the direct hit. It's what forces you to hit people directly with rockets, giving the weapon its name. Now don't get me wrong, the direct hit isn't a bad weapon. It's a fun side grade that's a bit worse than stock, but very much usable. That being said, this stat is detrimental. It causes you to lose out on all that sweet, consistent splash damage you get for free just by landing a rocket near someone. With a normal blast radius, the direct hit would be massively overpowered and unfair, which is why this stat has to be detrimental. It's a good thing. It allows the weapon to be fairly well balanced and still fun to use.
On hit, restores up to 20 health points.
Okay, this stat gets blown out of proportion. 20 health isn't really even that much, especially to soldier. It's 1/10 of his health pool, 1/11 if you have battalions. On top of that, you don't get 20 health each successful hit. You get up to 20. 20 is the maximum amount of health you can get in one hit. I've said this before, you get the gist. Give black box users a break. Regardless, I won't deny that the health on hit is useful. It has the potential to save your life, just not as often as another rocket. It's a decent stat, 3 stars.
Has a 25% smaller clip size.
This is very bad. This is the reason I don't use this weapon. The black box is a fine side grade, but I think that the clip size penalty overpowers the healing bonus. Again though, this is up to preference. In a pinch, are you more comfortable with the safety of health, or the safety of another rocket?
Grants the player 200% extra max primary ammo.
This is kind of the rocket jumper's forgotten stat. You know, not super noticeable, but I feel it's important to the weapon. When using it, you have to make up for the fact that you can't damage people with it by bouncing all over the place and constantly rocket jumping, therefore constantly firing rockets. Couple this with the fact that you're not typically getting a ton of kills while using this, and consequently not getting many ammo pickups, I feel like without this stat, Troll Germains would be running low on ammo way more frequently. Then again, they have the means to get to any ammo pickup on the map fairly easily, so they could probably survive without this stat. It's decent though. Good choice in weapon design, I think.
No self-inflicted blast damage taken.
This stat is excellent. It allows you to rocket jump all you like with no consequence, making you more mobile than a scout on certain maps if you're good enough. There is, however, obviously a stat that cancels this out, making it not the best launcher in the game.
Unable to damage enemies.
Very, very, very detrimental. It forces you to rely on your secondary or melee to deal damage. Usually melee, because most of soldiers' secondaries either suck or can't deal damage.
Unable to carry the intelligence and the pastime jack.
This is very much tolerable. I don't think anyone plays pastime, and most people don't give a shit about the objective in CTF. Like, yeah, you could probably single-handedly win some CTF games or pastime games with this if it did allow you to carry the intel or in pass jack. But when you equip the rocket jumper, you're signing up to go for goofy kills and jump around. You don't care about the objective, and that's objectively true.
No random critical hits, purely cosmetic, as they don't inflict any damage either.
Like the description of the stat itself says, this has no effect on the weapon, as if it did random crit, it still wouldn't deal damage, and crit rockets don't send you any further or higher when rocket jumping, so this stat is literally pointless.
Plus 25% clip size.
Okay, I'm sure many people disagree with me on this, but this stat makes the Liberty Launcher worth using in my opinion. While the clip size penalty on the black box is very bad, the clip size bonus on this is very good. There's even an old video on ZessyJesus' channel in which he referred to the weapon as a crutch in comparison to stock, because the extra rocket gives you more chances to aim and more opportunities to dish out damage. Which is true, right? True that you have more room for error with the extra rocket, not that it's a crutch. That's a bit extreme, obviously. But of course nowadays he puts it in C tier like everyone else who doesn't put it in D tier, which is also a little extreme in my opinion. I think this stat makes the weapon average, a solid side grade. It doesn't deserve a bad weapon academy, it doesn't deserve C tier, but whatever, I'll save it. This one's got a few more stats to talk about.
Has 40% faster rocket speed.
I kind of believe this stat gets slept on somewhat, in a couple different ways. First of all, you might be surprised at how much less easy it is to dodge a Liberty Launcher rocket. Like, it's not a huge difference, but it's a sizable one. Second of all, well, I'm not really going to factor this into the rating, as it's not really a big deal. Plus, it might just be me, like I'm not even sure if anyone else has noticed this. If you have, let me know. Does the projectile speed increase on the Liberty Launcher, as well as the direct hit, make rocket jumping feel a little weird, and maybe even a little more difficult and ineffective? Like, I have the timing down to the point where it's literally muscle memory to get as much height as I can out of a rocket jump, but with these weapons, it just feels off. Nothing significant, of course, I just thought I'd bring it up and ask if it's just me. That aside, just think about it. You got an extra rocket, and all 5 rockets are a bit less likely to be avoided. That's a decent stat.
Minus 25% blast damage from rocket jumps.
This is what I believe to be the weapon's least remarkable stat, but for whatever reason I feel the devs intended it to be what the weapon should be known for. After all, it's the only launcher with a rocket jumping damage penalty that isn't completely unnoticeable, or too severe to the point where it needs to be neutered so hard that it's literally not even a weapon anymore. But it's really not enough to be a good stat either, it's mediocre at best. However, paired with the gunboats, it's basically a rocket jumper that can deal damage. Like, yeah, the gunboats immediately make any damage-dealing launchers so much better, but with the Liberty Launcher, it's like an entirely different game, man. Seriously, give it a try if you haven't. You take, like, less than 15 damage per rocket jump. Anyways, on its own, though, this stat is still mediocre.
Minus 25% damage penalty.
And we're here. This stat. This fucking stat. Everyone hates the Liberty Launcher because it deals 25% less damage. Oh no, boo-hoo, it's the end of the world. The Liberty Launcher is so trash, bro. No, it's not. Fuck you. This is. Literally, it's literal trash. The soldier probably just made it in 5 minutes out of shit he found on a city sidewalk. Right, I'm just gonna say it. Yeah, this stat is annoying, but tolerable. I'll give it official annoying status, 3 stars, just because I don't want to ride the weapon's dick too hard. But you can deal with it. Yeah, 68 isn't as big of a number as 90, but 4 isn't as big of a number as 5. So, well, actually, when I put it like that, I sound like a dumbass. Which I am, but I'm still right. Fuck you. Next weapon.
Does not use ammo, replaced with an ammo meter.
Now, this stat doesn't really have a purpose. I'm pretty sure they only gave the cow mangler this stat because it needed something besides the charge shot, and giving it an energy meter rather than an ammo reserve fit with the theme of all the spaceman-looking weapons, some of which also have this stat. Now, I won't act like this is a useless stat and that it has no effect on the weapon, because as a soldier main, I run out of ammo every now and then, and it can be annoying. Like, if you have a medic and he's confused as to why you suddenly start meleeing people and fail to protect him, or if every time you see an ammo box it gets stolen by a scout or something. It's tolerable though, therefore making this stat mediocre.
No random critical hits.
Our first no random crit stat. You'll find that this stat is generally tolerable for most weapons, but on some melee weapons it's more significant, but on everything else it's certainly tolerable. One thing to note though, is that this stat is usually only on weapons that have other means to get critical damage, but the Mangler doesn't. Yeah, it has the charge shot, but that's entirely different, that only mini crits. I guess maybe they didn't want to visualize or model what a critical Mangler rocket would look like. I don't know, it's just a strange and specific choice for this weapon. You can't even use the laser gun theme excuse because all the other space weapons with ammo meters can random crit. It's not like it matters much at all, it's just a strange choice in designing this weapon.
Deals only 20% damage to buildings.
I don't know why the stat is worded so weirdly. Anywhere else there's a damage penalty, it just says 35% damage penalty or 60% less damage to buildings. But it's different here. Whatever. So the Mangler deals 80% less damage to buildings, meaning it'll take you like 4 or 5 times as long to destroy a level 3 sentry, dispenser, or teleporter. This means you're about as effective against a nest as a friendly Hoovy. If you're alone, that is. This weapon has its own special trick to dealing with engineers that we'll get to later on. But this stat alone can turn Soldier, one of the engineer's biggest counters, to a pathetic little mosquito. That being said, this stat is a little less than tolerable. It's often annoying. You're usually going to have to encounter an engineer at least once per game. And where you would otherwise just take some shots at his gun to see if you can take it down, you instead have to immediately back off and reconsider your attack plan. It's a roadblock, right? But it's almost tolerable, you know? It's not that bad.
Many crits whenever it would normally crit.
This one's even weirder than it having no random crits because it's so weirdly specific. It can't random crit, so there's only like 3 scenarios in which this comes up. When you're being ubered by the Kritzkrieg, when you have intel crits, and during victory time. So this stat just means Kritzkrieg medics don't want to uber you, you're less effective than you would be after the intel gets capped, but your entire team still has full crits, so it doesn't really matter, and killing people after the round ended is slightly harder, which literally doesn't matter. I was gonna say that it's tolerable and give it 2 stars, but it really doesn't matter, like, at all. So it's gonna get 1 star, no effect. Weird, shitty downside. Side note, there's actually 2 exceptions. It deals critical damage to Marasmus while he's stunned, and it deals critical damage if it's reflected by a crit boosted pyro. But it's not even really the Soldier's rocket at that point, so who cares?
Secondary fire is a charged shot that...
This is a very, very interesting stat. This is the Mangler's charge shot, and as you can see down there in the bottom right, it has 5 substats of its own, and instead of explaining and rating each substat, we're just going to be rating the charge shot as a whole. Now the charge shot is something I'm going to refer to as an optional stat. It's an aspect of the weapon that isn't passive. You have to actively decide if and when you would like to use it. Now for most weapons with an optional stat, like the Rap Assassin for example, not using it and completely ignoring the little Christmas value you get in the Rap Assassin's case, the weapon becomes a straight downgrade. But for the Mangler, you can choose to fully neglect the charge shot and still have a perfectly decent side grade to the stock rocket launcher, right? You just don't have to worry about ammo, and sentries are your weakness. Like I said, the stats are weird and random, but 80% of your gameplay is going to seem functionally identical to using stock. So technically, this stat can have literally no effect on the weapon. But here's what's interesting. Even if you do choose to use the charge shot, I think the negative substats almost perfectly balance out the positive substats, meaning the stat still gets 1 star, no effect. You need to be fully loaded before you can fire the shot, and you have to take the time to charge up the shot, meaning you need to have somewhat of a plan of what you're going to be firing at before you even fire. And after you fire, you have an empty clip, meaning you're extremely vulnerable. And since you're going to be focused by tunnel visioning onto whatever you plan on shooting at, you're less likely to notice someone who may realize what you're doing and plans to ambush you while you're in this very vulnerable state. Those are the downsides. The positives are that it mini crits, nice, sets people on fire, nice, and disables buildings for 6 seconds. That's the little trick I was talking about earlier, huh? Problem is, you still need a team to deal with it for you. This just makes it 10 times easier for your team to deal with it, making it arguably an even stronger counter to sentry nests than stock, as long as you have a coordinated team, that is.
Hold fire to load up to 3 rockets.
I think it's safe to say that the Beggar's Bazooka is the most unique rocket launcher. Instead of just having a clip with rockets in it that you fire, then reload, you start with an empty clip. Load a rocket and immediately fire it. Or, you load another rocket and immediately fire then, releasing 2 rockets in quick succession. Or, you load 3 rockets, then immediately fire, releasing 3 rockets in quick succession. If you don't fire after loading 3, well, we'll get to that, but just know that you can't load more than 3 rockets. So that's what this stat is. The fact that the Beggars functions this way is this stat. Got it? Now on one hand, this stat is debatably negative, as your shots are delayed because you have to take the time to load before firing. So let's say you're caught off guard or have to fire a rocket to defend yourself, but you aren't prepared for it. With stock, you just click, and bang, rocket fires, mission accomplished. With Beggars, you gotta click, wait, then the rocket fires. Mission still accomplished, but you might be dead or injured. Bad, right? So this is a bad stat. No, not exactly. This stat also allows for you to have an infinite clip. Well, a clip of up to 20, which is practically infinite in terms of a rocket launcher. That's great. That's very good, which is the rating I'd give this stat if it weren't for the whole debatably negative side of it. That brings it down to decent. But what about the barrage mechanic, you say? Well, that's a different stat.
Release fire to unleash the barrage at 70% increased fire rate.
So the barrage is nice. You just load it up before turning a corner and maybe you kill someone, surprising them and usually yourself. Or maybe you don't. You're actually allowed to hold all 3 rockets without firing if you taunt, technically making this weapon pay to win, since you can load the rockets, taunt by a corner, look around the corner since you're in third person, and instantly delete the unfortunate soul who falls into your trap. It's decent, I guess. It's really just an extension of the first stat, so...
Plus 3 degrees random projectile deviation.
This one's cool. It pretty much means that every rocket you fire will fire in a random direction within a certain radius around your crosshair. By the way, Soundsmith has a whole video about all things pertaining to the Beggar's Bazooka, and it's actually a very well-made video. You should watch it if you haven't. One thing he brings up in that video regarding this stat is the idea that since the rockets fire in somewhat random directions, that can make them harder to dodge due to being less predictable. I'm pretty sure his exact words are, "How are you supposed to dodge a soldier's rockets if even the soldier doesn't know where they're gonna go?" Which, it's an interesting take, but I'm not exactly sure that's how that works. Sure, because the rockets are unpredictable, every now and then you're going to get a situation where someone might try to bait the soldier into right by faking right, then strafing left instead, but it doesn't matter because the rocket randomly happens to go in the right direction and actually hit them. Then again, this also means you're going to occasionally run into scenarios in which the soldier shoots the rocket right where he needs to in order to hit his target, but the rocket goes off in a random direction, missing entirely, which may result in the soldier's death. So depending on what kind of person you are, you may like this stat, you may think it's a good thing, or you're me, and you think it's annoying. I'm not going to say you're wrong if you think it's tolerable, has little to no effects, or actually think it's a positive. I'm just going to disagree with you, that's all. I actually think the weapon would be better if the person using it could physically aim it.
Overloading the chamber will cause a misfire.
So this is what happens if you try to load a 4th rocket. In case you didn't know. You explode. The 4th rocket just blows up and you take a lot of damage. Now there's really 2 sides to this one. On the one hand, this allows you to do some crazy rocket jumps. Jumps not possible with any other launchers, since this one allows you to wall jump when there aren't any walls. It's tricky to get the hang of for sure, but once you've got it down, it opens up so many possibilities with the shit you can do with it. Again, watch Soundsmith's video. It showcases some of the insane things you can do to pull off with this stat. On the other hand, this stat can get you killed under certain circumstances or if you're not paying attention. Plus, if this stat weren't there, you would be able to just hold the 3 rockets forever until you wanted to fire them without having to taunt. Meaning you could just always have a barrage of rockets prepared to demolish the next foe you encounter. Which would be very good, making this stat very bad, right? Well, yeah, if it weren't for the overload jumping. I honestly think that brings it down to tolerable. Although if you disagree and would give it even 1 or 0 stars, well, I won't fight you on that. The overload jumping is cool and really good.
Cannot collect ammo from dispensers while active.
So there are 2 types of people. The people who forgot this stat exists, and the people who've played Soldier in MVM, right? Because this stat is so annoying in MVM, let's be real. But we're not taking MVM into account here. I have to say that in case someone brings it up. So pretty much what this means is that you can't collect reserve ammo for your Beggar's Bazooka from a dispenser if you're holding it out. If you put it away, it will fill up with rockets, which leads me to believe this stat only exists so you can't have a literally infinite clip by standing next to a dispenser. Because I guess if this stat didn't exist, a Beggar's soldier could pretty much just find a dispenser and spam a doorway forever, blocking off the doorway forever. So this is a good stat. It just prevents you from playing in a very boring, gimmicky way, which is tolerable for sure, and I like it. I honestly wish there were more stats like this in TF2 that prevented specific boring and annoying playstyles. Props to the balance designer of this weapon.
Minus 20% less explosion radius.
This is the Beggar's other forgettable stat, considering it's the least unique stat the weapon has. I don't really know what to say about it. I gotta say it's tolerable since I didn't even notice the weapon had this stat until I looked on the wiki, so it can't be annoying. That's my verdict on this one. I don't know, man.
Minus 15% damage from rocket jumps.
Okay, obviously on a weapon where the main benefit of it comes from rocket jumping, you need another stat to complement that. This is that stat. Obviously, you can't make the self-blast resistance too much, or else the weapon would just be unreasonably broken. But this stat still exists because if the weapon encourages you to rocket jump, they don't want you to be punished too harshly for rocket jumping. Although it's a small addition, it's nice, and it's a good addition. That doesn't mean it's not mediocre, though. Since the self-damage you take from the rocket jumping is rather inconsistent, it can be pretty unnoticeable a lot of the time.
Increased attack speed while blast jumping.
So this is supposedly the main course of the weapon. Well, depending on who you are. Some people use it for this so that they can rocket jump above a group of enemies and rain down rockets to unlimit 185% faster firing speed. Others use it for the other stat that we'll get to in a moment. Something that should be noted is that both of these stats have somewhat of a built-in downside to both of them. This one's is the fact that you're encouraged to rocket jump very often when maybe you really shouldn't be rocket jumping very often. Plus, it's situational. It's not super common that you're going to jump up over a bunched up group of enemies and be able to destroy them with all your rockets. You know, I don't know, dude. This weapon, it makes sense, but it's so weird. I'm just going to go ahead and redirect you to ZessyJesus' video on the airstrike, because this is the last weapon, and it's so incoherent, I don't know what the fuck to say about this. ZessyJesus' video is a much better review and explanation of the weapon than anything you'll find here regarding it. That being said, this weapon pretty much forces you to equip either the gunboats or the base jumper, since otherwise you can't rocket jump often enough to get value out of this stat, or you can't stay airborne long enough to get value out of this stat. So if you use any other secondary, you end up with another Mangler situation. You get an optional special attack that could work out pretty well for you, but it could also certainly get you killed. Though the Mangler's downsides are much more situationally bad than the airstrike's more passively bad negative stats. That said, with the airstrike you get a passively pretty good stat as well, much better than the Mangler's doesn't need ammo stat. But we'll get to that in a moment. First we gotta rate this stat. Now while it can be very good, maybe even excellent sometimes, it can also be mediocre or even debatably negative, so I'm just gonna go ahead and compromise by giving it 3 stars. Decent.
Clip size increased on kill, up to +4.
This is the other reason you might want to use this weapon. Like I said, better than the Mangler's passively good stat, but this stat kind of makes you wish you also had that stat on this weapon. That's this stat's built-in downside. You're fucking reloading all the goddamn time, and you still only have 20 reserve ammo, meaning you run out of ammo often, especially if you go for the whole justice rains from above gimmick. This weapon's a lose-lose, and we haven't even gotten to the downsides yet. You have to use either the gunboats or the base jumper to get value out of the other stat, but if you get too much value out of that stat, then you're somewhat punished by this stat. Again, go watch ZessyJesus' video if you haven't. This breakdown is a mess. I'm losing my fucking voice. This stat is decent. Same reasoning as the stat before this one. Time for the airstrike's downsides.
Minus 15% damage penalty.
Tolerable. Not much to say about this one, it's just a minor damage penalty, although you may want to note that there seems to be a rule that if a rocket launcher has a damage penalty, it has an equal self-damage resistance to balance it out, and vice versa.
Minus 10% explosion radius.
Also, tolerable. Wait, what?
Minus 20% explosion radius while blast jumping.
Okay, here we go. Finally a stat worth talking about. So this explosion radius penalty, which only applies while blast jumping, actually stacks with the previous explosion radius penalty, which is always applied, adding up to about 28% total smaller blast radius, therefore making it officially annoying! Well no, actually it only applies while rocket jumping, and 28% isn't that much. Plus, while rocket jumping, you're going to be raining down loads of rockets anyways, so it's still tolerable. Why is the airstrike such a mediocre weapon if all of its downsides are tolerable? I guess they all add up to the point where they're annoying? Maybe it's the built-in downsides the good stats have? Still don't know. Again, watch this SCG's video. That's all I got, man. We're done here. I guess I gotta record an outro because I'm not doing the secondaries. That's gonna be a different video. I don't know if I should just move on to the soldier secondaries for the next one, or if I should do primaries for a different class. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna go finish editing this video, and then later this week you can expect either more controversial TF2 opinions or a parody of Despacito about the degreaser. And then after that I got kind of a funny video planned. I don't know if I'm actually gonna do it. Subscribe. I want to be a TF2 YouTuber. I think it would be fun. If you have a friend who's new to the game, share this video with them. Because I want to teach people stuff. Bye.